You're listening to Season 3, Episode 9 of the Indie Film Tribe Podcast with me, your host, Angela Matimocha. Welcome! Hi there, good people. Hi. Angela Matimocha here of Indie Film Tribe. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am really excited about today's episode because the guest that I have today is the first guest of this type, and I'm just so excited to talk about to talk with this man. As you can tell, I'm bubbling. In any case, our guest today has been working in the entertainment industry since the 60s. Since the 60s, you guys. This is really amazing. So much to learn from this man. He is a longtime commercial director. He's also a cinematographer. He has worked on films like Tron, 2001 Space Odyssey, you guys, Star Wars, Star Trek. The list goes on, and just the people that he's worked with as well. We'll definitely get into that. But what's really interesting, and one of the reasons why we do have him on today, is to talk about his most recent project. He decided to spend his retirement money to make this unique, gritty, but ultimately cathartic, low-budget film called Lost Fair. Lost Fair is a crime thriller based on the childhood of writer Rachel Ray, who was sold by her mother and father into child prostitution. You guys, this is something, really something, and I am just so honored that we have this man with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you Mr. Bruce Logan. Bruce, welcome!
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here and a great honor to be here.
Oh my gosh, I am so thrilled that you are here as well. And I've got to ask you, I was looking at, some of your credits. Is this true that you did some of Madonna's music videos?
Yes, I produced her. It was actually a second music video, which was Borderline. And she was very unique to work with. She already knew who she was and who she was going to be, but we didn't. So so it was a very interesting experience working with a young lady that was so self-assured and on her own path. It was really fantastic.
That's interesting to say that it was just her second music video, and she already knew who she was.
Yes, and her first music video she shot the day before, so she was in her, it was really her first outing into film, so it was great.
Was her first music video, was that Burning Up?
Lucky Star.
Oh, it was Lucky Star, okay.
Yes.
Wow, and how did you end up working with her? I mean, obviously you didn't know who she was then, no one did, but how did you stumble upon that sort of opportunity, as it were?
Through Mary Lambert, who was an up-and-coming music video director, and we had, I'd known Mary, I think, for about a year, and she got this gig. I ended up doing some Go-Go's videos with her, and
wait a minute.
yeah. And a bunch of different things. And then she went on. She did a feature called Siesta, and then what's it called, Pet Cemetery. So she's a very unique talent.
Wow. Okay, so you worked with Belinda Carlisle.
I did.
Oh my goodness. So tell me a little bit about this. So I'm assuming when you were working on the Madonna project, that was back in New York City, is that right?
No, that was here. She came out here, and we shot in downtown LA, and we did a rooftop scene on the top of the Technicolor building in Hollywood.
Wow.
And we shot in the loft also downtown. So.
Okay, so this was back, gosh, early 80s, late 70s?
I think it was 83. Yeah,
Okay.
83 or 84.
And you're from London.
I am from London.
When did you come to the States?
I came to the States. I'd worked on the 2001 A Space Odyssey for 2.5 years, which turned out to be the longest gainful employment that I've ever had in my life, a job that went on that long. I came over here to work for Doug Trumbull, who I had worked for. He was one of the visual effects directors on the movie, and he asked me to come and work for his new company here in North Hollywood. So I came over, and we were working on a movie called Zabriskie Point, which was by a director called Antonioni, and one of my favorite movies was Blow Up that he did. But this Zabriskie Point movie was where the whole world blows up in the movie. So we had to do these shots of explosions. So we went out in the desert and we let off thousands of pounds of napalm.
Oh my God.
And these huge explosions, and we were going to do a matte shot and put it all together. But they never used our footage in the movie. But then 12 years later, it got dug up and it was used in the opening scene of Blade Runner, when you're flying over Los Angeles and all these explosions are going on. So it got used.
Oh, wow. Interesting. That's fascinating. 12 years later. So obviously this was shot on film.
Yes.
And there was no issue using that same footage, footage from 12 years prior.
No, in fact, film negative is much more stable than videotape or any electronic media. I think LTO tape is the best archival medium for digital information, and that really only lasts 25 years, whereas film lasts 100 years.
Oh, interesting.
And beyond.
And beyond.
Yeah.
Oh, that is fascinating. Gosh. So you really got your start as a producer and a director of photography, it sounds like, and visual effects.
Visual effects led to a DP career. I came over and I shot a movie for Peter Fonda, who was just coming off Easy Rider.
Wow.
And that was a fantastic experience. So he really gave me my first break as a cinematographer, shooting a full feature film.
Was the fact that you worked with Kubrick beforehand helpful, you think?
I'm sure it does. Career is all building on building blocks, So, absolutely, And it's funny because when I was working on that movie, I just thought, well, all movies are like this, and now, needless to say, Kubrick was my favorite film director growing up, because my dad had taken me to see Paths of Glory, and then I'd seen Lolita and Dr. Strangelove and
A Clockwork Orange.
Well, that was after.
That's true. That was really
so it was incredible to be working with he was my idol. So
what was he like to work with?
Very sweet man.
Hmm.
But totally ruthless as far as his filmmaking, his movie, his baby, So he could be a very demanding boss, but he was very nice to me, but tough, because I had to sit in a room with him for 2.5 years, defending my dailies on a daily basis. So you'd shoot things, and we'd all be in this room watching all the film from all the different units, and you had to be in there to defend your work. So for a 19-year-old kid, that was luckily I was young enough that I wasn't really even scared about it. I just kind of took it in stride, But if I had to do that later on, I would have just, my jaw would have dropped.
And shaking in your boots.
Yes.
So when you say he was ruthless about his filmmaking, do you sort of mean just like ruthless in his vision, that he was very...
Yes, in his vision, I think he would have made the ultimate CG animator, because then he would have been able to control everything, every aspect of it. I think the fact that he had to make movies with people and deal with people was probably not ideal for him. So there was one time when I think I was out sick for a couple of days. He phoned up the house and said, I'm going to send an ambulance down to the house, and you can come in and shoot animation from a gurney. So needless to say, the next day I felt quite a bit better, and I just came into work.
Wow. Oh, that's incredible. Gosh. So then from there you go to working with Peter Fonda.
Yes. Well, I came over and did some work, which included, I'm kind of self-taught in everything. I taught myself how to animate when I was 12.
Oh, wow.
So by the time I was 19, I had quite a background, and I'd been working in an animation company for, so I've had some really great breaks in my life, but I've always been prepared for them. I've always laid the groundwork so that I was ready to get those breaks. So I had shot quite a bit of live action, and then Peter Fonda gave me the chance to do this entire movie. So, yes.
I mean, it's just so incredible because you worked with George Carlin.
Yes. Yes.
I can't imagine. What was that like? What a gem.
That was fantastic. We shot a comedy special for HBO, but it had lots of preamble to it, and we did this big kind of gangster black and white movie. So I was doing kind of film noir lighting, and he was just a really sweet guy, just brilliant.
Brilliant.
He is missed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Imagine if he were here today. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, is he missed? Okay, I am just literally in awe just when I go down the list. I mean, just the amount of, Jamie Foxx you've worked with, just the amount of different sort of talents as well is just so fascinating to me.
Yeah, no, I've been very blessed, and I always, it's funny. People look back at my career and they say, "Gosh, look at you! It's been amazing." And yet, while I was having it, it was always, well, what's next? It's not enough. I've got to just keep going. And I still feel very, very energetic about my career and what's next and what I'm going to do with it. So. As long as as long as I can stand on my feet for 12 hours, I will be shooting movies. So.
Let me ask you this, because you've been a cinematographer, as I look here, all through the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and it's interesting to me that you've had so much experience behind the camera, literally, as a cinematographer. Why only now, or in the last few years, did you finally decide to be a director and write and direct your own film after, being of service to so many projects for all these decades?
Well, I think it's been a long time coming. In other words, it's been my goal since the 80s.
Wow.
And so starting in the 80s, I started writing scripts and teaching myself writing, which has probably been my longest journey, to come to fruition with that. But so it's not that I haven't wanted to for a long time. And, before Lost Fair, I had 2 pictures greenlit, and within a couple of weeks of commencing principal photography, and they pulled the funding on them, And
Were these studio pictures?
no, they were independent pictures. They were both going to shoot in New Mexico, but didn't work out. So I finally said, I'm just going to do it on my own. I have to do it, So I wasn't going to take no for an answer, and I didn't really want to be beholden to anybody as far as the financing went.
Yep.
So I broke that golden rule. We're never supposed to
use your own money.
Yeah.
Who makes these rules, right?
Exactly. And I wouldn't have had it any other way. It's just because I'm not sure that anybody else really would have made the story. I mean, it's a very dark story.
Very dark.
But it's also
necessary.
Has this metaphysical element in it, and it's really by the end of the movie you're glad you've seen this experience, because really, I studied meditation for many years, 20 years, and the thing about consciousness is it's not, everybody says, oh yes, I'm trying to get higher consciousness, but really consciousness is spherical. So as you expand your consciousness upwards, you also expand it downwards. So you're reaching into the depths, and you have a feeling of the high. So you're just experiencing everything more deeply and more widely. That's my belief.
Do you feel that because you were able to finance this film, Lost Fair, on your own? I mean, I can imagine one of the benefits is that you had complete and ultimate creative control.
Well, you do and you don't. You got the film gods, and they ultimately they decide what's going to happen, And actually, one of the questions that you gave me is what's one of the hardest things to do? And I think one of the hardest things for me is to you want to create this project, and you have to plan it, especially when you're doing something in 11 days.
11 days?
11 days. The kids can only work 12 hours, so we had to shoot it in August while they were on holiday.
On holiday, yeah.
And so is that you have to plan everything to the complete nth degree, but it's never going to work out that way. So it's the question of complete control, and then giving up every control, and it's like knowing where the balance is between those 2 points, because the movie's going to make itself, really, and so and it's always having you've also got to have a backup position, because you're not going to go back to any of these locations, and so. You have to get it done, and it doesn't matter, And I would say that the greatest advantage that I had was having worked on so many sets, and I've been a commercial director for many years. Probably shot and directed 300 television commercials. Is that each one of them is mounting a little production all on its own and doing it. So that experience of doing that, you can't, people look at you and say, well, how did you know that was going to happen? And it's because I've been there before, and you recognize patterns of when things are going to go wrong and how they start to go wrong. So that experience, I think, really made it possible for me to get that movie done in 11 days.
Yeah, that must have really prepared you. But I can't help to wonder, I know as an actor on these commercial sets, I mean, they're paid by these ad companies, and the budgets are massive for, 2-minute spot. Sometimes a whole 2-minute spots, what we use to make one feature film, So did you find that challenging? Because it wasn't as big as a budget as some of these commercials are?
Well, they're expecting a lot when they're not putting that money out and then you're taking all that money home with you. It's like they want to see that money on the screen. So as far as controlling production value, and I've seen a lot of directors, they have all this stuff, but it doesn't end up on the film. So you have to learn to bring all the production value into the frame so that it can be seen, and like all those values, because there's no point in having 200 extras if you only see 10 of them. And when you're working and you're setting up shots, so because things in commercials have to happen in a, I know that I have to get this section in 1.4 seconds, and so you've got to tell that little tiny piece of the story in that length of time. It's a fantastic discipline about how to get stuff onto film, and also packing everything into the frame so that you can see it.
What do you, I can't imagine, because you did it for so long, what do you love about being a director of photography? I want to start with that before we talk about writer-director.
Well, to me, spending 12 hours a day on making the image look incredible, is a whole, that's a thing in itself, And I would sometimes shortchange myself because on commercials, I was both the cinematographer and the director, and it's called a director-cameraman. And the agencies love to work with director-cameraman because they've only got one ego on the set that they got to deal with. So they're just funneling everything into you.
And one paycheck.
Right. Well, no, the paycheck expands if you. But no, it's definitely just creating beautiful images is it's a pure experience in itself. So I don't, I can direct something and then I can go back and be a cinematographer, and it can be just as satisfying just doing that with the image and knowing what your relationship with the director that you're working with is, and that changes on every project. Some directors that you come to, they want you to do everything except talk to the actors about their performances. So you're blocking everything, you're doing all the shots. And other directors, they've got all that thing, and they just say, put the camera here, and then basically all you're doing is just lighting the scene and making sure that it's well photographed. So,
which do you prefer to work with?
Of those kind of directors? Well, I like a lot of control over the image. So
yeah.
But it's also it's a lot more stressful to have to if the director's vision isn't kind of pulling into your department, and you have to. If I'm playing makeup to someone that's really he just wants to talk to his actors, that can be harder because you don't really have his vision of the project, in the same way. So even though I like to do a lot of things, and I like to block, and I like to work with the actors, it's not always a good thing because the vision of the director, it's your job to get the vision out of the director and make that happen. So.
What advice would you give to first-time film directors in working with a director of photography?
I would say that it's most important to get, obviously as a director, it's part of the casting process that you're going to use such and such a director of photography. Now, that wasn't always true in the commercial business, because sometimes you get a job with an agency and they say, yeah, well, we want you to use this cameraman because we have a relationship with him. So you're being thrust together and you don't really know what's going on. But In the same way that you cast actors, I think you're going to cast your DP. So you're going to see if you're creatively simpatico with him. You sit down, you watch a couple of movies with him, your favorite movies, and ask him to show you a couple of his favorite movies, and you start a dialogue and you get that whole thing going. And then I think that the next most important thing is to see whether, there's an old joke about how slow cameramen are. There actually are hundreds of jokes like that. How many cameramen to take the screen of light bulb? Lots and lots of them.
Lots of them.
So you got to see that the guy's going to match your project, because there's no point in getting somebody that like John Tull, probably one of the greatest natural light cinematographers in the world, and you're doing an interior picture, and you're doing it in 18 days, because it's not, so you've got to match the speed that this guy's going to be able to work, and see how suitable to your filmmaking style that he's going to be,
All right, so I like that. Number one, have a sit down with a potential director of photography, or watch movies together, talk about movies that you both like. And then number two, make sure the cinematographer is in sort of alignment in the speed or pace of what your project's going to be. Some people might take a long time to set up, and that's not going to work for every project.
Right, and it can for some, if you've got that much time. But the director's job is to utilize everything that's given to him, and one of the most important things that's given to him is time.
Yes.
And it might be very little of it, or it might be more of it. But that time management skill is incredibly important for a director.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us today, Indie Film Tribe. This was part 1. Part 2 will be coming up next week. Until next time, bye.